Is that these operations do take many months of planning. And as you said earlier on your program, there was a CIA team on the ground for several months. They've obviously got sources inside Maduro's security detail. They've had a massive buildup of US military forces, including US Special Forces. So it was an operation months in the planning. And obviously, there are question marks about legality and what comes next. But as a military operation, it was very effective. But what they're relying upon is US domestic law enforcement, and the use of military force to protect those carrying out the what they would see as a lawful arrest. Now, for us, that's a real stretch legally. I'm not a lawyer myself, but and I think not surprising that Keir Starmer and his government have distanced themselves from this operation without actually making any criticism of it, because it wouldn't have passed muster here in the UK. But Americans are a law unto themselves, and in some ways, this was an assertion of American power, raw American power, and a message to others, especially in the Western Hemisphere, who might want to stand up against American power. There were reports that there was some withholding of intelligence in the Caribbean region because we didn't want to get ourselves tied up with operations which were not legally cleared under the UK system. So I don't think there's any responsibility here on the UK side. I'm sure good analysis was put to the Prime Minister about what the American options were and what they might do. Whether they predicted the abduction of Maduro, I don't know. Yeah. Well, first of all, I think I'd be cautious about using the phrase regime change. The Americans have abducted the leader of Venezuela, Maduro, and taken him to the US to stand trial. But they are now already dealing with the regime. The army remains in power. The legal structures of the regime remain unchanged. And they're already talking to Delcy Rodriguez, the vice president who's been sworn in as the new president of Venezuela, and distance themselves from the opposition. So this isn't the sort of regime change of the sort that we saw in Iraq. And it's commensurate with the clear reluctance by Trump to put large-scale forces on the ground. He wants to deal with the existing regime. But in the long term, I think this gives a license to people like the Russians and the Chinese to use force in their own neighborhood. Now, what does it mean for Iran? Well, the situation in Iran is very interesting. There have been these widespread protests across the country, reaching some 170 towns and cities across the entire state of Iran. And a certain number of people have been killed, about 15, I think. But the regime has held back from using full force because it doesn't want to attract another attack from Israel or the Americans. But of course, if the Americans and the Israelis do start calling for regime change as a result of this, that has an unpredictable effect. When the Americans and the Israelis were bombing Iran's nuclear facilities, there was a certain rallying around the flag. Nobody wanted to be associated with the Israelis in particular. So I think the Israelis got limited power.
There are a number of important international legal concepts which the United States might have broken by capturing Maduro. And that's important to understand within the international sphere. First of all, of course, there's a violation of state sovereignty, which is contemplated in the UN Charter Article 2. There is also a different point which is important to consider, which is the head of state immunity, by which usually a head of state is granted immunity even if he's charged by a crime during the time that he is in power. And there is the prohibition of extraterritorial law enforcement, which is exactly what this case would be. It is a capture or abduction of a foreign leader in foreign soil. Now, to understand where we stand, it is important to take into consideration another thing. According to the United States, it's important to understand that he does have an outstanding arrest warrant for drug charges. The indictment does stipulate that Nicolás Maduro and others have been very active in the drug trade since 1999, which would have an outstanding, which at least, pardon, which gives an explanation to the outstanding arrest warrant. And also there's another important sign. The fact that this is going to be prosecuted in the Southern District of New York gives us a clear idea that the United States government believes that they have a very strong case against Maduro. This is, number one, the Southern District is where the real rock star prosecutors are based, but it's also where the toughest judges are. So the United States, the DOJ, believes that they have a very strong case against Maduro. This is the preeminent reason why it's being charged in the Southern District. Of course, one must not forget that in the Southern District, they have also charged other Mexican drug lords. So it's a common place for these cases to be charged, and we will have to see how the judge rules on the forthcoming case. To take precedent into consideration, we have to look at two cases. First of all, Manuel Noriega in Panama in the 80s is a clear case of the United States invading a country to take out a leader, but this has a different logic. The current framework of the United States has deemed criminal enterprises which are focused on the drug trade as terrorist organizations. So under that logic, Nicolás Maduro would be something similar to Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden being the head of a terrorist organization, which was captured and killed in Afghanistan, versus Nicolás Maduro being under US law, not a foreign leader, but most importantly, the head of a criminal organization who has been captured and put to trial in the United States. So it's uncharted territory regarding this being a head of state, but not if we look at it as in the Osama bin Laden case or another terrorist organization. So it's a bit of both. It's a very interesting times we're living in, to say the least.